You know it's pretty arbitrary, right? The places where we start and stop reading from the Bible. I mean, the people writing the Bible didn't have little bite-sized congregational readings in mind when they penned these books of stories and wonders, these letters and poems and histories. They were simply a writing, no verse or chapter numbers in mind. We chop it up to make it easy to find things, and since we can't read everything Luke wrote on a Sunday, we pick a section, like we did this morning. But it's always a little bit arbitrary, always just a little snippet from the middle of the story. We're reminded of that fact when a reading starts with the words, "after this," which our reading does today. And if you back up just a little bit to see what that "after" refers to today, here's what you find. A bunch of people standing around, scratching their heads and saying, "We have seen strange things today." It might have been fun to start the reading right there. Immediately before this story of Jesus calling one of his disciples and then joining him for dinner, Luke tells about Jesus healing a paralyzed man. A couple of his friends brought him to the house where Jesus was staying, but the crowds were thick that day. And instead of trying to barge into the house, or wait their turn, I guess, these guys got the creative idea of climbing onto the roof, prying off a few of the tiles, and lowering their friend in through the hole. You might imagine Jesus or the homeowner getting a little worked up, saying this was not the brightest idea. But not only does Jesus not reprimand them, he's touched by this act of minor vandalism and heals the man on the spot. The man gets up off his mat and elbows his way through the crowd and heads back to his home. It's a scene of chaos and also an amazing healing. You can understand why people are standing around in this house with a big hole in the roof, filled with amazement and awe, and saying to one another, "We have seen strange things today." After this, Luke writes, he went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at his booth. If I had to give this whole section of Luke a title, I would call it, "We Have Seen Strange Things." Because that's what happens here in the story of Jesus, one strange thing after another. No sooner has Jesus healed that paralyzed man than he comes upon this tax collector sitting there at his booth. If you've read the Gospels much, you know that tax collectors are not typically the most sympathetic characters in New Testament times. You have to remember that Jesus and his disciples lived under Roman occupation. Rome was in charge, and there were reminders of that fact all over the place. Government outposts in the cities, soldiers afoot to keep the peace, and tax collectors everywhere, to be sure individual citizens did their part in paying for the occupation of their homeland. Government officials and the soldiers were Romans, of course, but part of Rome's plan was to hire tax collectors from among the local population. You can imagine they weren't the most popular folks on their block. One commentator puts it bluntly, toll collectors as a group were despised as snoops, corrupt, the social equivalent of pimps and informants. Not the sort of people most sought out as friends. You have to keep that in mind when Jesus walks up to Levi's booth and says those simple, demanding, unconditional words. "Follow me." He's already said that to a bunch of fishermen, ordinary people who were not likely the most educated or most religious bunch around. It was one thing to call those guys, but now he's saying the same thing to a tax collector, a snoop, a guy whose honesty is suspect, whose hands are dirtied with the money of the occupying power. "Come on," says Jesus. "Follow me." That's no stranger than Jesus healing a paralyzed man and telling him to walk. In fact, the story uses the same language for the two of them. The paralyzed man stands at Jesus' command, and so does Levi. He got up, left everything, and followed Jesus. Both left their pasts behind, stood, and walked. We have seen strange things today. Things go on this way, of course. Levi puts on a banquet for Jesus, and who does he invite but his friends? A load of other tax collectors and others not considered particularly polite company. And there is Jesus in the middle of it all, sharing a meal, laughing and eating and drinking, finding his community among those, not among those who are all put together and presentable, but among those whom society isn't too sure about. A meal like this showed who your people were. And so that's what Jesus is saying. These are my people, the ones who are broken. I'm here to share a table with them, to share their life, and to call them to something new. Strange things. That's what you see when Jesus is around. You see that strange community that we read about in the book of Acts, where people shared what they had and took care of one another's needs. You see that community we heard about in the letter to the Colossians this morning, where people were urged to forgive one another and to clothe themselves with love and to live as a single body. I know that after a while that all starts to sound like normal churchy talk, but in a world of dividing and conquering and putting a price on everything, there's nothing normal about it. We have seen strange things. There's a bumper sticker I used to see on the road every once in a while back in the U.S. that says simply, "Keep church weird." I like that message. I like it because in 3 words, it actually says a lot about following Jesus. I mean, Jesus has always been out of step with the majority, always calling people off the beaten path to something new. When the church has been getting it right, it's done that too. When the church has gotten it right, it's been a little weird. Now, I don't want to claim that we always get it right as a church. We're a human community, and we stumble along like any bunch of people do. But I've got to tell you, I have seen some strange things around here. And I'm not just talking about a sanctuary stuffed full of helium balloons in Advent. I've seen people, and I understand before that there was a sanctuary full of potato plants, so there's been all kinds of weird stuff. I've seen people willing to give their time to mentor another family's son or daughter in confirmation because they believe the Christian faith is important enough to pass on, person to person. I've seen people give up their Saturday morning to chop vegetables, stir bubbling soup pots, and serve a meal to 200 complete strangers because they know that serving others is something we're made for and called to do. I've seen people praying for enemies because they take Jesus at his word. I've seen people from vastly different backgrounds and perspectives looking across a meal table and seeing not strangers, but friends, because the gospel has brought us together. I've seen a UNHCR refugee tent squeezed into a church garden because it reminded us to pray and act for those on the move today. I've seen people giving their time to care for a beautiful old building because it continues to serve as a house for worship. I've seen people looking honestly at their money and choosing to give away not just the leftovers, but an amount that is genuinely precious to them, because they see that our resources are there to be used for the good of others, and they know that we grow in giving that away. I've seen people struggling to sing in languages they have never spoken before, and welcoming people very different from them, and making space for others who are rich and poor, and male and female, and gay and straight, and young and old, because God gathers us this way. I've seen strange things here, and I'm guessing you have too. We are in the middle of our fall stewardship campaign right now. It's a time set apart to think and pray about what this community means to us and to think about how we will each support this in the coming year. We spoke last week about gratitude, and we practiced that together, naming things for which we are grateful. The leaves hanging from the tree up here this morning are covered with words of thanksgiving. If you get a chance later, I hope you read some of those. This week, we are asking you to think deeply about this congregation and the role it plays in your life. How does it make a difference for you? How is your life enriched through being a part of this community? What's strange and wonderful things have you seen here? In the coming weeks, we will be asking you to give to the congregation. And of course we do that because our ministry is only possible when we, the church, offer our time, our personal giftedness, and our money. But the deeper reason we ask you to give, the real reason, is because the ministry we have together is important. Because it means so much to so many. Because the strangeness of the gospel is so much needed in our world today. Jesus keeps doing what Jesus has always done, calling people to get up and follow toward new and fuller life, making a place for everyone without distinction, simply because each is holy and beloved, weaving together a new community around life that is blessed and broken and given. And we get to be part of that. That's the offer. That's the gift. Friends, what a joy to be part of such strange and wonderful things. Amen.